very beautiful afternoon from our studio, IKD 106.1 FM. Of course, your one and only radio station. And it is time for the issues. First off, I sincerely do apologize for the delay. This is due to an unavoidable occurrence. But then I should let you know that the issues is here for good. Today being the 20th day in the month of June 2022. My name is Adebambo or Payami. And of course, I'm going to be your host today on the issues. I'm not alone in the studio. I have my very own guest, a vast medical practitioner who will be doing justice to the conversation today. We all know that 19th of June is a day set aside for every father out there celebrating the fathers. And I should say happy Father's Day to every father out there. And of course, to my guest in the studio today, I should say happy Father's Day. Today, we would focus on a conversation that has to do with the International Fathers Mental Health Day. It is set aside by the World Health Organization, of course, to orientate and to put no to the general public activities around the fathers. It is called the International Fathers Mental Health Day. And the theme for this year is Building Better Mental Health in Men. Now, this will be our conversation for today. Our time is fast spent, so therefore we would go straight into the conversation this afternoon. I should say good afternoon to our guest, Dr. Olabanji Adesoji.
Good afternoon.
HOD, Medical Health Department, Ikorodu General Hospital. Good afternoon to you one more time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Deba. Thank you very much for having me. Sorry for the delay as usual. So
Yes.
sorry.
It's good to have you in the studio, I should say that.
Thank you very
So
much.
let's go straight into this conversation. When we talk about this International Fathers Mental Health Day, what is the essence for this day? Because like every other day, we know that talk about the Father's Day to celebrate the fathers, talk about Mother's Day, talk about every other health day. When we talk about the International Fathers Mental Health Day, what exactly is this day meant for?
Okay, so thank you very much. I think the reason why Father's Mental Health Day was started was because there was a certain young man in the UK who had postpartum depression
Okay.
after he became a father for the first time. Now, here's the thing. Most people understand postpartum depression for women because they feel, okay, she's the one carrying the baby, she's the one that is 9 months pregnant, she's the one going through all the stress. So most people do not understand that it is a very stressful thing to become a father for the first time. And here's the shocker. 1 in 10 men who have children for the first time will suffer from postpartum depression. But the problem is nobody thinks about it. The second reason is the fact that, yes, we run a patriarchal society, so we've overshot our desire to help women, to look out for women. So we have 65 Mother's Days, we have several Women's
I was
Day.
going to say that.
But we now found out that because we did that, we were neglecting fathers. And here's the funny thing. If a man is not there in the life of his child, or you do not have a father figure, that child will not grow up well. So you hear of single mothers who say, okay, Father's Day is also for them because they're the fathers and the mothers.
True.
But the truth is, a man was designed to reproduce after his kind. And so when there's a man absent in the life of a child, the child's development is going to be affected. So we're saying if a father's mental health is not taken care of, it affects the entire family.
Okay, that's a very well said one, Dr. Olabanji Adesoji. You just heard his voice, the head of Department Mental Health Department in Ikorodu General Hospital.
Yes,
We
sir.
still look at this theme, building better mental health in men.
Yep.
Before we get into that conversation proper, when we talk about men, I think statistics came out one time saying that about over 10% of men are affected in a way or the other.
Yeah.
So I would ask this question, when we talk about parental upbringing as a father, how does this mental health have to reflect? How does it have to do with parental upbringing?
All right, so let's understand that the World the World Health Organization defines mental health as the ability of a person to use their abilities to the best of them. It also talks about the ability to cope with normal stress, the ability to be fruitful and productive and contribute. So what we found is that when a father has excellent mental health, it helps him cope with parenting, and it also helps him reproduce children who become better parents. So here's the funny thing. Most of us never learned from our fathers how to become a father.
Most of us never learned
How to become a father. Nobody. I'm in my 40s. My father never sat me down and said, when you become a father, this is what you do.
Mm.
He never had that conversation. So what I did was I learned parenting by learning from his example.
Mm.
So imagine if his example was a bad example.
Mm.
So it meant that I was going to reproduce and model what I had seen.
Exactly.
So here's what we're saying, that because parenting is stressful for both parents, it is important that the people that are going to parent this new generation, this new society, have excellent mental health. Because if they can't deal with stress, if they are not bringing the best of their abilities, if they cannot be fruitful and productive, they are going to raise children who are going to be less than average, who are going to be less than mediocre. So that's the problem. So that's the reason why it's important that men who tend to think mental health does not really concern them, because they're like, me I don't have a problem.
Exactly.
I don't need it. Forget that if your mental health is affected, it affects every part of your life. Every part. And so we say, men, pay attention to your mental health. Pay attention to how your emotions are. Pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to how willing you are to be there for your family. And these are the things that people have to look out for, because if they don't, we tend to have problems a lot of times. So here's, for example, I run a mental health clinic twice in General Hospital Ikorodu, and most times when I see a married woman, she's there either with her mother, a sister, or a friend. When I see a man who's married for the first time in my clinic, I see him with his wife most times. 50 or 70% of the times. So the question is, why do men take off when it comes to mental health of their wives? In fact, I've even heard people say, my husband say, make I dey go my papa house. Make I go solve the problem because it did not happen in his house. I brought it from somewhere. And it's that we need to build a better society where we can have these conversations and people can be real instead of drowning it in alcohol and other things.
Thank you so very much. It is still the issues on IKD 106.1 FM. I, for one, I must say that I'm beginning to swim into this conversation already, and that is all thanks to Dr. Gbadebo doing justice to the conversation. So when we talk about this parental illness in men particularly, how then do we define this mental illness? Some persons might not even be able to give a proper definition or have an understanding of what mental illness is in itself. But you being the head of department for such a great department, how would you define mental illness?
So what I would say as mental illness is, it's a health condition that affects three things. One, it affects the thoughts of the person, affects the emotions of the person, and affects their behavior. So when people tell me, look, how do I know when something is becoming an illness issue? I tell them, how has this person changed in terms of behavior? How do they deal with stress? How do they deal with conditions that are seemingly beyond their capacities? And so when a person says, okay, look, it used to be quiet, suddenly it has become very loud. That's a change. When a person used to be very extroverted, used to go out, and has suddenly become the person that wants to sit inside the house all the time. When the person says, okay, look, I used to be able to deal with my anger. Okay, I'll get angry, but at least I'll keep it in check. And then suddenly the person says, I don't know what came over me. I just lost it. Or I just became so angry and I did things and I can't explain what happened. So those are the things we look out for. So when there's a deviation from normal, please note that there's something going wrong. And most times people are like, look, okay, it's him, it's his personality. But if it's beginning to affect, so for instance, the person says, oh, it's just who I am, and you get angry to the point where you start to beat up your wife, for instance, in cases of domestic violence. Sometimes the reason for it is because there's a mental illness. So for instance, there was a guy that told me, I heard a voice in my head telling me my wife is the cause of my problem. That's why I've not progressed. So beating her is going to make you progress. And it's like, no, but the voice says she's the witch. So, I mean, those are some of the reasons why we can say, okay, this is an illness. This is not just a behavioral issue.
Some persons will say, according to just what you said, actually, too, some persons will still claim and say that this is how we are in our family. Some will say it's in our lineage, it's an inheritance. Is it a fallacy to say that, or you also agree with that?
I totally believe that personality is, to some extent, I'll say 40% DNA and 60% environment. So, for instance, I come from a lineage of like 10 generations of men who are blunt truth tellers.
Mm.
I mean, my father told me about the fact that my great uncle lost his first marriage because my grandfather went to visit them. And everybody had been talking about the issues, but nobody was going to come out and say
And
it,
face
that
it.
she was older than him and she was earning more than him.
Mm.
So my grandfather goes to the house, greets them, loves them, does everything. And as he's going, he now tells the wife that I hope you will be sharing part of your wealth with your husband. That was the end of the marriage.
Mm.
So now I can go forth and say, because of that, I will say truth to everybody I meet. But the point is, sometimes people are not ready for the truth.
Mm.
So it's about DNA and how you were raised. Now, I was raised by a very tough mother. I was raised by a man who was not very tough, but his words were tough. So, like I said, we're truth tellers. So there are things my father said to me at 7 that I remember in my 40s. There are beatings my mother gave me at 13 that I've forgotten about. So we're saying it's DNA and environment. And of course, DNA determines. So for instance, I am raising children right now. I tell them all the time, tell the truth, no matter what happens. No matter how much you think that is going to be upset, always tell the truth. Never look at the person in the eye and tell him a lie. It's unnecessary.
Have this at the back of your mind. You just heard Dr. Adesoji say that always tell the truth. It is also important. It helps your mental health in a way or the other. The essence for the World Health Organization, setting a day such as this aside, is to orientate the general public and, of course, put men on a no. And that is why the theme for this year is building better mental health in men.
Yeah.
Now, before we talk about how to build better health in men, mental health in men, I should ask, what exactly are the causes of this so-called mental illness? Because I want to believe for the fact that there are causes to mental illness.
So we divide them into biological, psychological, and social. So biological basically means that there's something wrong physically with the brain. Some of them are a little too much at certain things for certain people. Some of them are a little too low, and that is what causes illnesses. So for instance, an illness like depression. We found that there are certain neurotransmitters that are generally too high for certain people, and that's the reason why they have depression. So that's a biological reason. A psychological reason is your personality. So, for instance, a person who was born with an avoidant personality. An avoidant personality is someone who does not like to hurt people, does not like to tell people when they are hurt, and is always trying to be the yes person. Now, this person now gets married to a person who's abusive, emotionally abusive. Now, because this person's personality will not allow them to express hurt, they allow themselves to live in a marriage that is toxic. And they continue to repress their emotions, and they just keep finding other ways to deal with it, and then suddenly they snap. One day you heard a woman kills her husband. It was not that it was the one thing he did, it was a pile-up. Then there's social. For instance, there are things about, poverty has been found to be directly linked with mental illness. Losing your job, losing your spouse, losing a child. These are certain things that can happen. And then, of course, it's also been found. Yes, mental illnesses occur in all socioeconomic classes. As they say, the rich also cry. So it affects every socioeconomic class. But it's been found that people who live in crowded, cramped surroundings tend to have more difficulties with certain things. And then if you live in an environment, for instance, let me not call names, but there are certain places in Ikorodu that if you live around there, there's greater access to psychoactive substances like cannabis, like ice, and all those other things. And so those are the things that reinforce bad behavior. So, of course, we also know that psychoactive substances can cause mental illnesses. So things like ice, which is the street name for crystal meth, actually can cause schizophrenia. And that's the reason why I keep telling young men and young women that, look, you can't afford to play with this. So, no, Canadian loud is mild. It's not a problem. But then somebody now mixes your Canadian loud and says, okay, let's just lace it up with a little ice. And the person ends up in the AR in General Hospital. So that's what we're saying. Different things add up to cause illnesses.
All right. Thank you so very much. Now, before we have our major focus for the day, which is how we can build a better mental health care in men, the question I'll ask is this. You've been the head of department for such a department, the health department, mental health department. By statistics, how much of men do you think comes down to you? Is it can you strike a balance between the men or the women, or we
Okay.
have more of men than the women?
Right now, we've been running clinics regularly for the last like 2-3 years, so we have data for that. Now we have more women presenting, definitely, and but of course, the issues are that we see all kinds of mental illnesses. So, for instance, depression occurs more commonly in women than men. In fact, most men that are depressed will never admit they are depressed. I saw a 62-year-old man who had lost his wife, his first wife, lost his mother, lost his job, and had a wife who he just got married to, who was having a medical issue and wanted to get pregnant, and he was not having erectile issues. He was sitting in front of me and I was saying, "Are you sad?" He was like, "No, there's nothing wrong with me." "Okay, what is the problem? Why are you here?" They said I did this, they said I did that, but I'm not really sure. So I sat down and I said, "Look, okay, all these issues that have happened to you, how are you coping?" And the man burst in front of me and started crying. That was the first time he was crying about the issues. And he was like, "I am tired of these problems." Now, if such a man does not get an outlet to talk about them, such a man, if he's courageous enough, would die by suicide. Because when a person feels, I can't cope, I'm feeling overwhelmed, there is a way out of this problem. Let's take my life and let's leave the problem. So we see more women than men, but in cases of psychoactive substance use, of course, we see more men than women for
So,
those kind of
with what you just said, Doctor, that is to say that most of those men that we hear or persons that we hear are involved in suicide has to do with the mental health.
Most times. Look, okay, there's a percentage of people who die by suicide because they were impulsive. So, for instance, no mental illness before, just suddenly hears a bad news, and he just feels, "I can't cope with this," and he takes his life. But most times, 60 to 80% had a mental illness that was on the background, that whether they were conscious of or were not conscious of, whether they were treating or not. And the commonest one involved with suicide is depression, because that is the feeling that comes with a person who's depressed, that life is not worth living.
Some of the causes, according to our doctor today, that you just heard from, biological, psychological, and the social, these are one of the reasons, few of the reasons why persons are involved in our conversation for today. Now, let's dive into the conversation proper. I'm talking about building better mental health in men. That is the theme for the year.
Yeah.
How is this achievable?
I think the first thing we need to talk to men about is the fact that there is nothing wrong with being vulnerable. We've built a society, patriarchal, that says men don't cry. Real men don't talk about emotional issues. I mean, there was a joke my pastor was talking about. He said, 4 men, 2 of them have lost their jobs, 2 of them are multimillionaires. They used to be friends. They can gather together for 2 hours, talk football, talk politics, talk about women, and not once will the condition of this man does not have a job, how do we solve it, come up. Nobody talks about it. And they can be friends like that for decades. And it's that we've created a society where men don't open up. Men cannot be emotional. My family, we have a WhatsApp group, and my brother was talking about the fact that his family sent him a video for Happy Father's Day, and I burst out crying. And in another group, he would be lashed for that. But I said, I was actually crying this morning when I was doing Thanksgiving because of the fact that, okay, another Father's Day is my 5th year of being a father, and I know how long it took to get here, and I'm very appreciative. So we're saying we need to build a better society, and men need to become aware that you cannot hide from these things. You can't drown it in alcohol. You can't drown it in having sex with different women. You can't drown it with making money. It doesn't solve the problem. So the first thing is awareness. Awareness. So the culture of silence has to end. The culture of wearing masks, and people say, "Oh, how you feel? I'm top. Nothing will happen. Everything is fine." Yet you're dying inside and you're unwilling to share because you think, if I tell this man I'm feeling sad, he'll be like, "Why would you worry? Can you be sad?" So we need to start learning that. So the first thing is awareness. Second thing is we need to seek proper help when there's a problem with our mental health. I'm a Christian, I go to church, and there is nothing wrong with prayer. But I have a problem with people spiritualizing mental health problems. So I used to I did residency in psychiatric hospital Yaba, and every Friday it was like clockwork. People will come back from doing deliverance sessions at different churches. There was the most popular church for that was in Onike. And it was because the deliverance ministers were trained to tell people this one is not spiritual. Go to hospital for this. But many times I've seen people who've been in spiritual places for years and mismanaged, poorly managed, and some of them even do tricks. They put some of our drugs, put it in their holy water and give it to people to drink, and the people sleep. But it's not adequate dosage. So spiritualizing mental health problems has to end. Then the third thing is stigma. A person tells me I cannot tell anybody around me that I have a mental illness. I'm a single man. Nobody would want to marry me. And that's true. Because till tomorrow, families will say, hello, check ilé wọn, check ìdílé wọn, ṣé wọn ya wèrè rí? Here's the shocker. The family seeking to do intelligence about another has a person with mental illness in their house that they've locked up. Because I can't count the number of times that I had patients in the hospital whose children were about to get married, and the families will say, she can't come. We cannot let the other family know that her real mother has an illness. And I'm like, but she's fine. She can't go. They're like, no, we can't. She may misbehave. And then the person goes, we can't marry them. They have a mad person. So stigma is a major reason why people don't seek help. And it's a major reason why people don't even want to talk about this kind of things. Then the fourth thing is sleep. As Fela sang, Láàárọ̀ Monday, Ego Legbabakuba, we have lived in Lagos believing that the earlier you wake up, the later you sleep, the more money you make. It's a big lie. Because the richest people in Nigeria do not wake up till 10. They play golf on Monday mornings. So it is not about hard work, it's about smart work. So quite a number of times you see people, the first time I ever saw a 21-year-old sit in front of me with a high blood pressure of 160, 110.
21-year-old.
21-year-old female staff of an audit firm whose work was Monday to Saturday, could not go home because she was working on the island. Our family lived on the mainland. So they found her a boys' quarter somewhere in Lekki Phase 1. And she would take work home to the boys' quarters, work there throughout Sunday when she's supposed to be rested. She had not been to church for 4 weeks because she was trying to work. And so when I asked how many hours do you sleep, she said, sleep. What's sleep?
Wow.
It does not exist. So here's the thing. Most new parents will know this, that parents don't sleep when you have a new baby in the house. And that's a major reason why people who have a child fall down with mental health issues. Because they don't sleep. And so when I tell them, who's going to be with you in the house? They're like, nobody, it's me and my wife. I'm like, you are going to kill yourselves. How are you going to do this? I remember when we had our first child, I said, okay, we're going to put a cot, Abby. My wife said yes. The baby's going to sleep in the cot, Abby. She said yes. The cot is going to be in the other room, Abby. She said no. The cot is going to be in our room. Anyway, 5 years later, that girl still sleeps in my bed. But what it meant was that first 1 month, we didn't get up to 3 hours of sleep, each of us. It got to a point I told my wife, people are about to kill me. You're on maternity leave. You can go and sleep later. I have to go to work after we finish this video. So I left that room and went to another room to sleep. So sleep is important. So I say if you sleep 8 hours of the day, you slept 1/3 of your life. Good. The question is, you don't need all of your life to make your life productive. So sleep is the greatest or should I say, the greatest boost to mental health is your sleep. Because when a person is going to fall down with a mental illness, the first thing that goes is sleep. That's the first thing. So sleep is very important. So sleep well. Invest in your sleep. I tell people after you move to your house, the first thing you should invest in is a proper mattress. It is key to making sure you sleep well. The next thing you should buy after that is AC for your room, if you can afford. If it gets too cold, you won't sleep. If it gets too hot, you won't sleep. So you need to invest in sleep. That's the first thing. Second thing is exercise. And exercise does not have to be go to the gym, spend hours. If you walk for 30 minutes every other day, you would have boosted your mental health by more than 50 times.
Wow.
And but it has to be consistent. It has to be in the morning. And it has to be done in such a way, because some people go, so I walk to the bus stop. It's the same thing. And I'm like, the brain has one flaw. The brain cannot function on two things at the same time. So when you are going to the bus stop and you're thinking about my boss, I must not miss the bus so I can get to BRT bus stop and I can get to work. Your brain does not consider that as exercise. But when you walk the same distance for 30 minutes in the morning, you're not going anywhere, you walk back to the house, the brain considers that as, okay, time to relax, time to think, time to get better. So exercise is very important. Then the third thing that I would also exercise is please avoid toxic relationships.
Toxic relationships.
Yeah. So the first time I ever saw a male with a postpartum depression, which is what we're talking about, it was the mother-in-law that was the problem. And the mother-in-law had moved to their house because, of course, she was coming to do a mugo. She was going to take care of the baby. And she basically made him feel less than a man. Now, nobody supposed to move from 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom. Why not they stay for boys' quarters? Why not nobody move, go upstairs? What is your problem? Are you not working? Is your salary not enough? Maybe you should get a new job. And he heard that every day for 3 months. The truth was, at the end of it, he was tired. And he had started acting out and had become irritable towards his wife. And he said he didn't even want to see the baby anymore. Because every time he saw the baby, all he thought about was his mother-in-law and her saying he was inadequate as a man. So as much as possible, avoid toxic relationships. Then the fourth thing is, please do not buy the lie that you need to use psychoactive substances to be fine. So some people say, cigarettes make me relax, cannabis makes me feel better. The truth is, it may seemingly work, but it makes you worse at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. You've heard that from our doctor, our guest for today. He has talked about proper exercise. Sleeping well also is very important. It's key. Avoid toxic relationship. We cannot take more than this on the show. But I would say to you that this conversation has not ended because we still have to reschedule you to come back to the studio. I'll say thank you to Ikorodu General Hospital for allowing the HOD Mental Health Department to be our guest for today on the show. My name still remains the same, Adebambo or Payami. The issues continues tomorrow, same time, same station. Please join us. God bless Nigeria. God bless Lagos. And of course, God bless the beautiful people in Ikorodu. It's a bye for now.